Well, hello. Welcome back to another exciting edition of Coffee with Stephen. This time, hopefully, you can actually read that 1776 in the back. It's taken me literally hours of figuring out online how to try to flip this image on this camera. Hopefully, it worked out this time. In any event, this particular blog is entitled The Pawn, and it has to do with the idea of an armed society. We've always heard these missives before. You want to own a gun. Why is that? Well, it's be able to protect myself against tyranny. Really, how are you going to be able to use that 30-06 to take on an entire army if that's what happens? Well, actually, we saw exactly how that can happen both in Vietnam and more recently, actually, in Afghanistan and Iraq. The fact of the matter, when you have individuals that are committed to the protection of their particular homes, even with fairly rudimentary weapon systems, they are able to oftentimes start a much more aggressive advancing foreign force. So it's not outside the scope. The fact of the matter is, when we look at the use of arms as a deterrent to tyranny, it's not just simply from the standpoint of an individual standing in the town bell tower taking off the enemy as they approach. Oftentimes, it goes all the way back to the original battle planning on the part of the enemy as they try to figure out through knowledge of their enemy's resources how they're going to have to manipulate their materiel and their people in order to be able to secure a victory. And many times they start to realize that actually trying to impose their will through force is simply going to be too much of a cost for their own individual societies to bear. So, and it's not something that it just happened since 1789. We can go all the way back into antiquity and we can see that there's been this cost benefit analysis that empires oftentimes have had to go through when moving forward and trying to take additional territory. Now, we've got a lot of different potential problems that are involved right now on the international stage. We've talked fairly extensively about China. We've talked about Russia. There's other emerging threats as well, and they're not necessarily nation state actors. We are legitimately moving our defensive strategies towards great power competition. After 9/11, we switched. We forced ourselves to become a military that was oriented towards quick reaction forces. The special forces community suddenly came to the forefront as a lot of different small units were sent in for very, very specific mission objectives to take individuals off the battlefield. Well, as we move forward into this next century, that's going to actually become less and less. Now we're reorienting ourselves towards the realization that we may be engaged in direct conflicts with actual nation states, and in many instances, nation states that have invested quite heavily into a development of their own military. And in some instances, as we've seen very recently, as we've been wargaming with the potential attack of China onto the island of Taiwan, in 25 of our computer modeled simulations, we ended up coming up on the losing side of that strategy. So it's a fairly dynamic sort of, robust look into how we're going to be moving forward so that we can still continue to fight and win America's wars. That being said, as individuals that have chosen to bear arms, we have a social responsibility not only to ourselves, but also to our nation as well. And the individual bearing of arms actually may very well be one of the secret sauce codes that helps to prevent direct attacks onto this nation's soil. Anyways, I hope you read the blog. As always, it'll come online on on Wednesday at 7:30 in the morning Pacific Standard Time. As always, if you want to comment on it or contact me directly, you can do so at steven@artemishq.com. And as always, I want you to train constantly, train consistently, train repetitively, and train with purpose. Above all else, stay safe.